Welcome to our show. We have a very special and most interesting guest today. Her name is Mildred Winston Hughes. Mildred, thank you very much for coming to Mnemonic Interlude. I'm particularly interested in some of your background. Where were you born?
I was born on Township Line Road near Waynesville, Ohio.
Okay, and well, how did you get up here to Washington Township?
Well, my parents were farmers, and they eventually moved to the Spring Valley Road farm.
Right. Your farmhouse and farm are still standing
Yes,
there?
they're still there, and my brother, who recently passed away, had lived there all those years.
Right. Your brother was Harold Winston.
Right.
And Harold's farm is still there, his wife?
Yes, it's still there.
All right, when you moved there with Harold and your older sister, what did Spring Valley Road look like?
Well, it was more or less a little one-lane sort of gravel and sort of dirt road. And you knew everyone who went up the road, where they were going, and how long they were going to stay.
Nothing was secret in those
No.
days. Well, your father farmed, but I understand he died early?
Yes, he died in 1933, and my brother did the farming from then on with some help from my sister and her husband.
All right, so how old was Harold when he took over the farm?
15.
15 years old. That seems very young to run a farm.
Well, it was, but that was all he was ever interested in. He liked farming from the time he was a very small child.
I know he's done a lot to help the historical hounds from the Historical Society. Has gone there, and he's taken children or anybody who's interested around and shown them all the parts of the farm and the barns.
Well, he never got rid of anything. He liked to keep everything that was ever brought there.
I know he loaned us his farm wagons for the parade, and I guess he loaned them for everybody who wanted to use them.
That's right, he did.
And helped the fire department. I know
Yes.
he was always active at the ice cream socials.
If anyone asked for help, he never refused them. He was always willing to go out of his way to help anyone.
I know you brought a nice picture here of Harold when he graduates from high school. I hope we can get a picture of this. Most of us remember him as a tall man in overalls and
That's right.
white hair.
That's right.
And he had an unusual, what would you say, funeral, because his daughter drove the mules with his casket in the wagon to up to the center of town to be buried in the old cemetery.
They had talked it over a long time before that, and he always said that's how he would like to be taken to the cemetery, with the wagon and the horses.
So that was his desire. I know we all saw pictures of it in the newspaper. Well, we're interested again, not only in the fact that the Winstons are farmers, have been here a long time, but in some of your background, we're interested in the Alumni Association, so I have to get back to where you went to school.
Well, I first went to a little country school, a little one-room schoolhouse down on 73. I went there the first 7 grades.
And then when you came to Centerville?
I thought that was the largest building I had ever seen. I was sure I would get lost the first day I went there to school. And we never thought of going across the hall to where the high school classes were.
Well, now you're talking about what's now called the Megsig building,
Right.
but what was that like when you went to school?
All 12 grades were there then, and there were probably around 100 in the whole high school.
The whole, you mean the elementary too?
No, just the high school itself. In those days, probably 30 people was considered a large class in the high school.
For a graduating class.
Right.
Well, that's kind of different than today. We really have a lot of them. We have a picture here of you, and I think to get a good shot of that, I'll put a little background. I think it's such a charming picture of you. How old are you in this picture?
About 15.
What grade were you in?
I was a junior in high school.
A junior in high school. At the bottom of the picture, it says reception 1931.
Well,
what's that?
That's what they call proms now, only our receptions were very sedate affairs, and but we thought it was the social event of the year. I guess it was for us.
So the juniors and the seniors really got together.
Yeah, the juniors usually put on the dance, and it was usually held in the gymnasium at the school. Once in a while we would, I remember one time we went over to the Peerless Pantry in Miamisburg and had a dinner over there, and then one time we went to a movie in Dayton after we ate.
So with a combination of the two classes, I don't believe they do that anymore. I think the senior prom is it. There's
probably not.
Junior, senior prom. Well, we're interested in what happens after you graduate when the graduates form themselves into an alumni association. And we have here some books that you very kindly gave to the Centerville Historical Society. And what they are an accumulation of all the alumni associating meetings, starting with the first one. What's the date here of that first one? Let's see.
Probably about 1891 or 92.
Right. Well, our first graduating class was 91. And so the following year, the alumni are already organized. I thought perhaps some of the viewers would be interested in this first graduating class. We have a marvelous picture of them. Now, I know when you graduated, you were considered one of the brighter students. I think we have a picture of you. Did you have to give a speech as valedictorian?
Yes, I gave a speech.
Okay.
It happened to be the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, so that was one of the things I mentioned in the speech.
All right, and I think we have a picture of that. Okay, now I'm going to show a picture of the first graduating class. It goes clear back to 1891. Oh, I think there's your picture as valedictorian. You were very pretty, Mildred.
Thank you.
Look at that. You still are.
Oh, thank you.
And today I have here a picture of the class of 91. The lady standing, the young lady, is Sally Tate. And it was Sally Tate's descendant, Margaret Delaney, who gave us all these things about Sally Tate, her high school graduation picture and these other things. Emory Davis is in the picture, Lizzie Travis, and Maud Watkins. And that's a marvelous thing to have a picture. Sally's the one here. Now, we even have Sally's valedictorian speech that she gave. She called it a heritage for all. You mentioned George Washington, and she also is talking about heritage that came from George Washington. Anyone interested in that might want to look this over. Some of this was used in the 100th high school graduation in 1890. A young man who was a valedictorian came down and read what Sally Tate had written. We have even from the first graduation, the Washington Township Commencement Program, very interesting, from 1891. And on the program they had an orchestra, and each of the graduates gave a speech. They had class prophecies, they sang, they had all kinds of music, different people. And the superintendent, L.W. Weaver, presented the diplomas. Must have been a very important thing. April 8th, 1891. That's kind of early.
Yeah. Well, I suppose back then boys and girls had to be at home to do some farm work, so they probably wanted to get out of school so they would be ready to help out with the work when it was time to plant.
Was that true?
I imagine.
Was that true in your when you were in school too?
Well, there were not too many farm boys in my class. There were several farm girls, but most of the boys were from around Centerville itself, right in town.
Now, just when did you graduate?
In 1932.
1932. That's right in the height of the Depression.
Yes, sir.
Did that have any effect on the students?
Probably did, because I think our class could have probably been called a class who went through the Depression, because we started in our freshman year in 1929, and not too many boys dropped out, but quite a lot of girls dropped out, and I suppose they had to stay at home to help with family, or maybe they had to go to work to supplement the family income. That is, if they could find a job.
Yeah, that was difficult in the 30s. Well, we've put a few programs out front too, and we have these books to look through. These are the records of all the alumni reunions from 1892. And the sad thing is, when I look here in April of 1892, I do not see Sally Tate's name. She had died the October after she graduated.
Oh.
But it looked like a combined meeting. It says class of 91. They have Emery Davis and Susie. Then they have 4 new names. It says class of 92. So the 2 classes met together after the class of 92 graduated. And the best thing is it tells everything they served to eat and where they met. And some met at the old township hall, and some met at churches. But what's the most important thing in this book? What would be the value of keeping a book like this?
Well, I noticed a lot of those meeting minutes mentioned the weather, and it mentioned what they had for refreshments, and it's probably quite different from what they would have for refreshments today.
Right, and at the back of the book, oh, I noticed they also always have what the cost of everything
Yes.
is. I see lemonade was very popular.
Right.
But at the back of this book, it has, from the very beginning, all the graduates. Did they keep this very faithfully?
We did up until probably in the late 50s or early 60s. It seemed to be a little difficult to get the class lists then.
They were getting bigger,
They were getting
too.
so much larger.
Now I see they've numbered it down to Kermit Long is the last name. I see here he was the 320th graduate. Then you seem to move to this book. Now you had something to do with this book.
I had those books for a number of years until it seemed that there was not very much interest in the alumni meetings, so I decided before something happened to me I had better turn the books over to the Historical Society.
Did you write up any of the things in
I
here?
think a few of the, maybe some minutes from back in the 50s might be mine.
You were a secretary
Right.
at one time. All right, this book in particular seems to pick up in 1927. So this goes from 1892 to 1927, and it picks it up. Anyone wanting to do research would find these books more than interesting, because I see they are charging, raising the dues from 50 cents to $1, and then we get into the 30s when you're in school and they're only charging 25 cents for dues.
Well, probably no one had any money then.
What did you do at your reunions?
Well, we had picnics several times, and then we had dinners several times. We had a couple of dinners at the high school, and they used the high school cafeteria to prepare the food. And then we had covered dish dinners several times out at the Inland Activity Center.
Oh.
And
you had something to do with that.
Well,
why did they go to Inland?
Because I worked there, and at that time you could use the activity center as long as you were in attendance, and you saw that it was well taken care of and cleaned up real well before you left.
Well, now, who could come to these reunions?
Anyone who had graduated from Centerville High School.
So it could be all the graduates that are still alive.
And their husbands or wives, if they wanted to.
I notice at the back of this, and what's the date on this? I think this goes to, what year would that be? 30, what's the last one on this? 37 or 38? And it picks up where the other book left off, and let's see how many are in here. All right, you got to 498. Christopher Ward, John Walker, Marjorie Shawn, see a lot of Ina Pickering. So anyone who was still alive of the almost 500 graduates could come to it.
Right, anyone who graduated prior to that or since then, anyone who had graduated from Centerville could go.
I don't think that's true today. I think they have how do they handle it today?
Well, I think the classes are so large now that they probably just stay within their own class. I don't think they're too much interested in getting a large group or trying to get a large group together, although the class of 30, 31, and 32 get together every year or try to.
Oh, you do?
Yes, we try to.
What, for a dinner together?
Lunch. Most of the older people don't want to go out after night anymore, so we usually have a lunch.
Well, I know in Miamisburg, their reunion that they have every year is open to anyone who's graduated from Miami or Miamisburg High School, and they get hundreds and hundreds of people.
Well, I don't know why this Alumni Association sort of fell by the wayside. It seemed that as the classes got larger, there just wasn't the interest. And we used to know everyone in our class and know everyone in the whole high school, but now they don't even know their own classmates.
That's true.
If they
hundreds that graduate.
If they go to the South Wing, they don't know anyone in the West Wing, or if they go to the North Wing, they don't know anyone in the East Wing.
Well, it's nice if a community can stay small, and I know Centerville, Washington Township area, there's a lot of people moving in and out, and where Miamisburg has the advantage, a lot of people have stayed there.
Yeah, it's where Centerville is more of a mobile community now. People move in and live here for a year or two, and then they...
Well, can you describe some of the activities of the reunions, what you do at them in the old days?
Well, we used to have a meal, and then we would have a get-together, and everybody would tell what they had done with their lives. And I know when we had our 50th reunion, everyone was supposed to get up and tell what had happened to them in the last 50 years. And
It's quite a bit.
It was pretty interesting to see, and most of them had been successful citizens. And
well, did you do anything besides just have dinner and talks?
Not usually.
Back in the 30s, though, when you went to your first reunion, what did they do?
Well, they usually had some sort of a program. If someone had musical talent, they would perform. Or someone had speaking talent, they would give a speech. Or someone was especially good at reading, and sometimes they would bring cute little excerpts from magazines, something that pertained to our particular group, something that they had been interested in, or some little anecdote that probably meant something to someone.
Did you ever have dances or?
Well, sometimes we did, but it became difficult to get orchestras and difficult to get musical combos. It got to be pretty expensive.
I noticed in this one they talked a lot before you graduated in the 20s. They were always having dances. One place they were toasting marshmallows even. I got a kick out of that. But they invariably seemed to have lemonade. Even in 1892 they were having lemonade. This to me would be a marvelous source for genealogy. If people ask the Historical Society, can you trace any of my family members? Well, we can find out if they went to school here and how active, because what they wrote was a lot of detail. Did the society ever, or these alumni reunions ever get together to help graduating students in any way?
At one time, we had a scholarship fund. They were trying to support a scholarship student, but the alumni group was so small that they found it difficult to do that. So we, at one time, contributed $50 every year to the Driscoll Scholarship Fund.
For Mr. Driscoll?
Which was a county organization.
Oh.
And Mr. Driscoll had been our former superintendent, so we thought that was a fitting tribute to him.
I know I read way back in the early 20s, they were giving medals to honor students. And then they start mentioning raising money at the basketball games for scholarships. I see in this in 1929 that Ida Weller was the Toastmistress. See a lot of interesting names. A lot of fun to read through there.
Yes,
almost all of these in the early 30s says dancing followed throughout the evening. The orchestra under the direction of Clark Haynes. Clark Haynes was there at the orchestra, it seems, after many of these.
He later became musical director of Fairmont High School. He was there for many, many years.
Well, he's in and out of here. It's interesting. The Lytle Ladies' Aid Society participated in the program, and also it said they served the dinner. So he must have had a connection with Lytle.
I guess it was customary. A lot of church groups then used to serve dinners to raise money, so I think it was probably customary then to have various groups to serve the dinner. Because in later years they didn't really want us to use the school cafeteria because of the equipment. They always wanted someone there who was familiar with the equipment in the cafeteria.
So they would kind of discourage that.
They didn't like it too well if we asked to use it.
Did you ever have dinner at any of the other places around?
Well, we had the Wishing Well.
Oh, yeah.
And then
that's the old high school. I think a lot of people don't know that.
Old original high school.
Yeah.
And
what was this? I saw a reference to, it says the Rosemoor Tea Room. One time they had a banquet at the Rosemoor Tea. What was that?
I think that was the predecessor of the Wishing Well. I'm pretty sure that was its name at one time, the old high school.
Oh. It became a tea room after a high school.
Well, I guess.
Now it's going to be maybe a Mexican restaurant. It's gone through all the whole thing. There were some interesting things that had to do with what they mentioned about different members speaking. They used to do a lot more speech making.
Well, I think that was a talent that a lot of people had, or a lot of people developed, because
did they encourage it when you were in school?
I think much more than they do now.
In what way?
Well, we were encouraged to read aloud, and the literary societies in high school gave programs. I believe it was every other Friday.
Quite often.
Different people participated in readings, or Shakespearean readings, or Bible reading, or if the class had taken a tour to, say, the rolling mills at Middletown. That used to be a favorite place to go on a class tour. And we even went to the state hospital one time on a class tour.
When you say state hospital,
that was the one on Wayne Avenue in Dayton, which is 10 Wilmington Place now. But at that time it was called the state hospital.
Well, I think people thought of country school, that Centerville would have been thought of in those days, but really they had very good academic goals.
Very, very good, very good. And now you didn't get to buy your class ring then until they were sure you were going to graduate.
Oh.
But now I guess they can buy them as soon as they start high school.
I hadn't heard that. I guess that is true.
It seems to me they're able to buy them much sooner, but we couldn't buy ours until we got our first semester grades in our senior year.
Well, I know there's an interest again in the alumni associations, and I don't think the alumni groups, the class of 25 or the class of 46 or something, probably are keeping records as well as you did. I know there was an effort by a man called John Gluckert to try and get all of the addresses of every Centerville graduate into a computer and produce a book. I believe we have a number that I can call up maybe that anyone watching this program should call if they're interested in one of these books. It'll have all the graduates and telephone numbers and addresses. Or if you want to turn in that, I believe that it's on the screen now. And there's an interest in continuing this. It's a very good record to have. We hate to lose track, but we have these precious books that can help us along here.
Well, I was very interested in reading those books myself because I think I read them from cover to cover when I first got them.
I found myself doing that too. I brought something else along that people might be interested in. This is the first Elkonian, and it's the date is 1939, and here's a picture there, and it says Nevin Elliott. I think a lot of people know him as Ace, but the very first Elkonian, 1939, and it's very interesting to see the pictures and things. They were so proud of themselves. This is the whole group, and you could see it's typewritten, and then they must have photographed the typewriting, but it had all the sports and things in it. The first Elkonian, and now it's quite a big deal.
I find it interesting that the graduates then looked so young and so childish, and now you see high school graduates and they look like such mature people.
That's true. I look through here at some of the styles and things they look young.
Now the boys have mustaches and beards, and they look like mature men.
Well, I've really enjoyed having you here, Mildred, and especially from the Winston family. And I want to thank all our viewers for tuning in, and be sure and keep up your records of the Alumni Association.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.